Good evening and welcome to Poems On. I'm Al Basil, and this is the first show of season 4. Amazingly enough, we are now into season 4. And tonight, we're going to have poems about characters. It's the third such show in the history of Poems On. We did 2 of them in the first and the second seasons. And my guests tonight, my first guest, although she is hardly new to the doings of the show, is Harlin Bahan. And a returning guest is Dan Brown. And good evening to you both. It's good to see you.
Likewise. Good to see you, Lee. And even you, Al. Good to see even you.
Yeah, even I. Well, I'm going to, as I generally do, ask the new guest to go first. So, Lee, would you grace us with your first effort, please?
Thank you. The story I wanted to tell behind this one is that when I was in graduate school, I was friends with another married couple in the MFA program. And the wife needed to go up to the Art Institute of Chicago. So I had never been to Chicago, and I'm like, can I please go with you? So I went up there with them, and we went to the Art Institute. And while she was getting her business done, I was down looking at all the Van Gogh paintings. And her husband nearly had to pull me off a velvet rope because I was just loving how that man loved paint. And it was just his love of paint and the texture doesn't even start to come across in pictures and books and reproductions. This poem came from my love of that. It was a village scene with thatched roofs, and it was that, Provence sky and the thatched roofs. So anyway, Van Gogh's Sunflower of Cat. A school bus parked on a brick roundabout would not interest the Van Gogh Sunflower of Cat curled in a clay pot on my front porch. She could care less about number 2 lead pencils, a slicker crumpled in a child's room, if peach halves are canned in heavy syrup. In fact, she will not touch peaches or mustard or raw pumpkin or even an occasional crookneck squash, but loves eggs fried, domestic carp, the sharpest cheese. Such a cat never yields, won't lick your manila envelopes, and categorically refuses to appreciate paintings by Dutch artists. She just metamorphoses all day long, cocooned in orange sulfur sleep. I told you the cat was half Cheshire cat. You get the sleep.
Yeah.
Bravo.
So I think of Van Gogh, I think of the color, but I also think of the texture. So there's texture in the fur of this creature. I'm allergic to cats, so I have little truck with them.
Yeah, Lee, go ahead, Alan.
No. I was hoping for an answer. Is it texture also that you're suggesting in the image that we're imagining of this cat? Like the thatched roofs, which are not merely yellow, but they've got that texture to them.
Right. And there's largely it is though about color. Yeah, Al knows that I also quilt and color and arranging colors, and I love scrap quilts. So to make those talk to each other in a harmonious way is really important to me. And this also proves I can write free verse. Actually, almost a little free verse.
It's true. It does.
Which I haven't done in a really long time.
Yeah, no, that's great. No one can accuse you anymore of not being able to do that.
I worry about it at night, Dan.
So I didn't mean to cut you off, Dan. What were you going to say?
No, I just want to say I'm very taken with this poem, and I think this may be the first poem of Lee's that I've encountered. So it's a great introduction to your poetry. It's
I hope
it's
it lasts.
well, I as every bids fair to last. I mean, it's like sparkling with specific details. This cat, you get a sense of this particular cat, but all the thing, your observations are so specific and vivid. I really admire that because not one of the things my poems, I think that's not one of the strengths of my poems, but I mean,
Oh, you are wrong, sir.
I mean, a brick roundabout. I'm not the kind of person that even notices what kind of roundabout a school bus is parked on, or peach halves are canned. Crookneck squash. Squash is squash to me. I don't know what, but so domestic carp. Carp is carp to me. You're writing about domestic carp, and of course this fantastic, this fantastic orange sulfur sleep, and that sulfur. Now I mean, you weren't talking much about yellow throughout this poem, but I took sulfur to mean a kind of yellow color, which is the kind of color that his
Butterfly and brimstone.
So that's the kind of color his sunflowers are. So I just thought this was incredibly lively, funny, unpredictable, vivid, full of life. I really admired this one. Had a lot of fun reading this one.
Well, thank you, because I always, when I was, beloved Roger Mitchell was in charge of the MFA program when I was going through. And I said to Roger one time, he was liking a poem that was like this, which is my kind of whimsical side. And he was liking that a great deal. And I said, but Roger, I want to write more ambitious poems. And he looked at me in the little Roger Mitchell way and he said, but there are different kinds of ambition.
Yeah.
Which is the smartest thing anybody said to me, for a long space of time.
I mean, read an issue of Light, to get a sense of what it takes to be light.
Right. And I don't consider
Light
this
is not easy either.
Yeah, I don't consider this to be light verse. It's fun. It's fun verse.
Yeah,
lively.
No, I don't either. I made that reference only because light verse is frequently looked down upon and thought to be easy.
Right.
But the question that I had for you, Lee, is when we get into we started on your front porch, the clay pot on your front porch, and then when we get into the second and the third stanzas, in my imagination, I'm now in your house, and this is what's there. Number 2 lead pencils, a slicker crumpled in a child's room. You're canning peaches. That's why they're in heavy syrup.
No. I am using a can opener on peaches.
Okay. But they're canned and they're in cans.
Right.
So
I have them in my cabinet.
Yeah, and then just as Dan says, all of the stuff in the third stanza, unlike Dan, I can make distinctions between squashes.
You cook too,
and even carp, but that only helps me. That means that I can imagine this in even more specific fashion. And what he's saying is exactly true for me, except that I have a really, maybe an even stronger sense because, and of course, the peaches and the mustard and the pumpkin and the squash and the eggs and the cheese, I don't know about the carp, all are yellow in one way or another.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so they're all there. There's this rogues gallery of yellows that I think of peaches and mustard and particularly raw pumpkin. And when I see crookneck squash, often it's mottled and it's got the different colors, but often it's yellow. And so the carp is the only thing that stands out. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe domestic carp is got a yellow.
Domestic are koi, which are orange and white. In the pond, koi, those are domestic carp.
Oh, well, then there you go. That's got it too.
Plain old goldfish from orange from end to end, because a sunflower of cat, one of which I possess at this time but did not bring out to the camper, they have orange things in them too when the sun gets them.
Oh, so it's all there. And then even, the envelopes are manila envelopes, which is another yellow orange, a very distinctive color. And so just as Dan said, I mean, for me, this really explodes visually.
Yeah.
And then it isn't even sulfur, it's orange sulfur. So, very,
orange
very
sulfur
vivid.
is the name of a butterfly. An
Really?
orange sulfur. Yeah, there's a butterfly named orange sulfur, and and so I do, Petrarchy Shakespearean kind of pun thing with the butterflies and brimstone down there.
Wow, great.
That's where the cocoon comes from, because cocoon was an unexpected word, a beautiful word, and it may have been partly triggered in your creative crucible there by the existence of this butterfly. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I knew it was cocooned in sleep, but I do remember looking up butterflies and going, which one? Orange sulfur,
that's hard to beat. Well, this is great. This is a great way to get us going. So let's roll into Dan's first offering here.
Okay.
What's Dan doing?
So
he's got some characters, folks.
I do have characters. This one is called a cockfight dance.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right. I was on my way to the copier or something when I overheard a guy from the Philippines saying he used to dance professionally. Hard to credit, what with the belly on him, though the revelation did make sudden sense of a gait you couldn't miss the music in. I ventured over to have a look at the proof he'd pulled from his wallet, a snap of him performing in a folk dance troupe back home. No belly there. While his shirt and pants in the shot were standard issue, if entirely white. You couldn't say the same for the long green feathers dangling from his arms. On the evidence of a jagged comb of red, you were looking at a rooster. What he called it was a cock, as in a fighting cock. The dance was a cockfight dance. An adversary, he told us, was lurking slightly out of camera range. No sooner did someone suggest a demonstration than a fowl was in the house, kicking and pecking and otherwise being lethal. A glimpse of no kidding visitation, whereupon, panting, a man again. Among the ensuing kudos was a crack to the effect that if that was how he'd danced a cockfight dance, he must have won. Some evenings he, some evenings the other guy, he said. For variety, you'd think, or for the sake of fair is fair. But why speculate when he shared the real reason he and his partner shuffled things like that? To give two stagehand friends of theirs the pleasure of bouts that could accommodate a bet.
Like cockfight.
There's just all kinds of transformations of reality going on here. I mean, of course, there are real cockfights with real roosters. But this is not that. This is a presentation of a cockfight, but you can still bet on it, apparently. And the moment that I love in this poem is when somebody just kind of asks for a demonstration and you say, all of us, instantly, he didn't need very much invitation to transform himself. And this is without benefit of the white suit and the hanging feathers that we've already imagined in the photograph.
Plus,
Yeah, this is, I mean, right. Then going from the belly to no belly in the photograph, it's like a sleigh ride, for the reader or for the listener. You're going through changes, and all of them are unfamiliar. I mean, I've seen evidence of cockfights, but I've never actually attended one. And I wasn't even aware that there were mock cockfights done by humans. The whole thing is just fantastic.
Oh, geez. Great to hear. Thanks, Al. That's nice to
Yeah.
hear.
But it's told in such quotidian, for the most part, speech. I was on my way to the copier or something.
Or something. Yeah, that's Dan's voice. Yeah, I mean, you have a kind of a. You can simultaneously be colloquial and completely personal. It's what you say, the way that you say it. You show your thought processes explicitly, which is great. It's fun to feel like I'm welcomed in to the way you think, because you're a thinker. You're a serious thinker. This is not particularly in evidence in this poem, but we're going to see it in other places. So
if you say so.
Well, I do say so. And,
well,
okay. What I wanted to remark on that same thing. Let's see, I called it that brilliant what just happened. And you do the same thing with fins. That one word fins in one of the poems you're going to read.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not only good in this poem. You can do it at will.
That's in the salmon. That's in the salmon poem.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Lee, you broke up. What, Al? I couldn't quite hear what Lee was saying. What is she pointing out or alluding to?
What am I babbling about?
It just broke up.
Where did I leave you? Okay, it's the brilliant what just happened thing that you do in fins. Did you get that part of it?
I heard you relating it to the poem about the salmon, I guess, but I didn't get what you were saying.
It's the word fins. It's the way you use the word fins.
Oh, the way I use the word fins. And does that relate to something in here?
Okay, here, yes, a glimpse of no kidding visitation.
Oh.
Whereupon, he's saying a man again. And it's like, how many words is that? And you do it even more with greater brevity in fins. I mean, we have a clearly human speaker, and all of a sudden, I don't want to mess this up for people. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, don't. Yeah,
it's coming. All right.
Well, we'll get there. We will.
Well, that's great that this work connected with you so well, and you had so much fun with it. It's a true story, very exotic. It's a dance troupe that dances out a artistic representation of a cockfight dance. And I thought, it really happened just like this. And I thought this was a wonderful little instance of altruism. I mean, these two dancers, the only way you can bet on a fake cockfight dance is if you don't know who's going to win. So if you dance, if the same guy wins in every performance, they're a troupe. They're going around from city to city in the Philippines. If the same guy wins every night, you can't bet on it. So as an act of generosity to these two stagehands, they would change it up so that they could bet. I just thought that was a charming, sort of out of the way instance of altruism.
They would unfix the fight.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and you bring, we've just been through these literally altered states of reality, and then you bring it down to something that's very familiar. A couple of stagehands making bets. So I really like that as the fillip that ties it all together at the end. And you're right, it is a generous move on the part of the fighters.
Absolutely. The only other thing that might be worth noting about it, might be interesting or might not, is that in looking back on it, I realized I used a technique that I find in other poets I admire, where you're imparting information, but you're not doing it directly. So an example would be, well, how do you learn that this guy is wearing feathers? It could be just he was wearing long green feathers, but instead while his shirt and pants were white, you couldn't say the same for the long green feathers.
Right.
So now the feathers get in there, but it's in the course of another kind of speech act.
Yeah.
Or another example here, no sooner did someone suggest a demonstration than so I don't just say he started dancing like a bird. It's like the information is imparted in the course of something else going on to me, which is a little like music, something like happens in maybe in music of some sort. Anyway, there's so much of that in this poem that I just thought your listeners might.
The other thing about that is what you're describing to me, and you can talk about it in musical terms. You can also talk about it in just general storytelling terms as exposition. It's really good exposition, because in your exposition, you really have to try hard to do more than one thing, to not just tell people but to get us moving, and they're picking up things on the fly. So it's multiform, and you found a really neat way of doing that in this poem. And it's in musical terms, that can also happen in the exposition, where you hear things that are going to return later. There are a lot of pieces where that happens.
Exposition really is the right word, and it just occurred to me, I actually have an essay on this kind of thing called it's in Think magazine, and I think it might be on their website. Maybe you could find it there, called Exposition in Passing in Poetry.
Very good.
So that's what it's exposition in the course, or in the process of doing something that's not just rote, kind of dull exposition. Anyway.
I like that. I haven't heard it put the way that you're putting it, but yeah, I mean, in spirit, that's the way I think of how I open any of my narrative poems, of which there are many. Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to do that without necessarily classifying it. So it's a neat way to think about it. And I am interested in looking at your essay, because I've read a whole book of your essays, and that's only one of the ways I know that you're a deep thinker.
Thank you.
It's not only in your poems that you reveal your secret.
I'll take it.
Okay.
Right, well, thank you. I'm glad this worked for you guys.
Yeah, well, if you're going to have a poem about a rooster, even if it's not a real rooster, I've got to have one that involves a duck.
Yes.
And
is that where we're starting with the duck?
I'm starting with Why a Duck, which is, of course, a quote from the Marx Brothers. Why a duck? Why no a chicken? But the Marx Brothers are not directly related. That Why a Duck. I have a book about the Marx Brothers called Why a Duck. So they're inextricably linked in my head. So, but this is about my uncle, who was, in the parlance of the day, a character, and some of the ways that he showed it. This is a part of his life I was not around for, because I had yet to be born. But here we go, and the poem raises a rather deeper question. Why a duck? If we contain, like Whitman, multitudes, then some in there are liable to be wrong. Against our better angels, there are devils who can make it look like wrong is right. Still, they can't debase us altogether. My Uncle Felix was a case in point. Brought up in the teens and early 20s in an Italian enclave which had been the home of Irish immigrants before, he was a casual racist and a bigot, untroubled by a thought of how his tribe perpetuated patterns of injustice. Afflicted as a young man with glaucoma, he wasn't fit to serve in World War II. He ran a small saloon for the duration, downtown, across from where the trains came in. He had a pet duck fitted with a leash, and every day he'd walk the mile to town, proud of his Hamburg and his quacking friend, who'd lead him to the door of the saloon. Once there, he'd open up the place for business. He'd set his duck up on the polished bar and put a dish of beer next to its feet. In time, over-refreshed, the duck would wobble around the bar. That was the entertainment. No doubt, my uncle spouted narrow views and conversations from behind that bar. He was a raconteur, no man of action. He'd only shoot his mouth off out of anger, frustration, envy, or to get a laugh, while others acted out their bigotry. I doubt he saw the similarity. I see how he was wrong, and I condemn that part of him and what his words enabled. But I can hate the sin and not the sinner. Though he was flawed, I won't forgo the duck.
This is another one of your boys will be boys poems.
A great category. I love it.
Cleaning up after that duck. People are eating and drinking all of that service. You know, I'm going nuts.
That's fun. I love that, Lee. Your boys will be boys poems. Wow.
Well, I was
but
told.
I also love this poem.
Well, thanks.
Wait. I want to hear. What do you love about it?
Because such delicate sympathy is worked in for this guy who lets ducks poop on his nice poem. No, he had glaucoma. He couldn't go to the war. But here's this lovely detail. He wasn't fit to serve, but his saloon was next to where the trains came in. He got to be one of the boys. He got to build the fire for them to be around in this instance, you know. And they've been off killing people and doing all kinds of horrible, terrible things. And they get to watch a drunk duck walk around. This has got, thank goodness I'm back in America where normal stuff happens, you know, good stuff like ducks walking around. No, seriously, when you think about Catch-22 and that kind of insanity, or the MASH insanity, or any worse insanity, this is a lot more sane to have duck poop on your bar. I mean, that's a serious thing in here. And the didactic stuff, that I don't know how you get away with this. I do. I just explained how you did it. But, you know, here's straight out of the Bible verse. You know, hate the sin, not the sinner. I have heard that. Every pulpit I ever witnessed in my life, I've heard that. But here it is. And I totally, not just because I've heard it all my life, and I do believe that, but because the sympathy is so delicately wrought.
Well, Lee, first of all, I just want to say that I think you read this poem, the sin that Al is referring to at the end is not the bigotry. It's the pooping on the, letting an animal poop on the bar. This is a radically different interpretation of this poem.
During the writing of these.
I don't know how that got into the poem. This is something Lee brought to it.
Yeah, that's true. This is anyway.
I did not bring any poop from any duck anywhere.
Anyway, Al, I'm gonna jump into, and then you can respond to both of us, I guess. But I couldn't resist making that joke about Lee's response. But yeah, this is a very engaging poem. This is characteristic of a lot of your good narratives. You pick out this, again, quirky situation. You tell it. You're in no rush to get through it. You're able to work in some of the background, the World War II background, and so on. A little thing like the home of Irish immigrants before, that didn't have to be there to tell this story, but that kind of thing enriches the poem. I liked the over refreshed is a wonderful way of saying what that duck was undergoing when drinking this beer.
Underage ducks.
And I liked he'd only shoot his mouth off. That sort of idiom takes on extra resonance because those other people were shooting more than their mouths off.
Right.
And so that comes through very, very forcibly.
Good point.
And yeah, it's in your characteristic pentameter, well managed, well wrought as usual. Occasionally a tetrameter in there. I noticed I was reading your book, I'd see that some of your pentameter poems are sprinkled with tetrameters. There's ample precedent for that. So I just kind of said he knows what he's doing there. Yeah, bravo, Al. A good story, well told.
Well, thank you. I'm only as good as my inspiration, and if you knew my uncle, you would understand why it was impossible for me to avoid writing something about him. He was memorable in many ways. We would have an interesting conversation about what would you read as tetrameters, because in my ear, sometimes I lapse, but a lot of times what I hear as a pentameter, other people hear as a tetrameter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not by design, is what I'm saying. It's by peculiarity of my ear.
Maybe, I'm looking through them now. Maybe it was another poem that I saw. I'm not actually finding any right now. So maybe this one really doesn't have that, or just has one or something. So
well, whenever you run across one, I'd like you to point it out to me so that I can kind of see, because I catch myself doing it sometimes when I'm drafting. I catch myself not being aware that I've done it, and then I go, well, wait a minute. There's only 4 stresses in.
Well, here's one. I mean, maybe one to at least question. Brought up in the teens and early 20s. So I think you're putting maybe a stress on brought up in the teens and early 20s. And you can do that, but the more idiomatic way to just say it would be brought up in the teens and early 20s. So
yeah, and that's that.
Hear that
yeah. Yeah, that is the way that I say it. And you're right about that. Sometimes here's the thing. I was looking at Frost today, and I noticed that, like a lot of other poets, he'll have the 5 stresses, but he might have an article or two that are squeezed in between. In other words, he'll add a syllable to a pentameter line, essentially as an elision, that you just go through it to get to the next stress. Mm-hmm. And I don't do that. I do the other thing. I create a kind of a ghost stress that I don't say when I say it aloud, but it's there in the line if you look for it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's just a different way. It's like I don't give myself the latitude to just throw in a couple of extra syllables just because they're not stressed. I guess that explains it as well as
I get that. I really, this poem, that's the only line in this poem that even could be considered from that standpoint. All the rest are, to me,
better. I think what you'll find though is that you will not find a line like I just described encountering in Frost, where you've got a couple extra little bits in there.
Yeah, I get it. I think well, it doesn't matter what I do. I will say, I think earlier in my writing life, I did more like what you're describing that you sometimes do. And
Yep.
I think I've pulled away from that to some extent, but it's viable. I mean, that line can be in a clearly established pentameter context. You can say brought up in the teens and early 20s. You just can't.
Yeah.
It can be read as a pentameter. So,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
So anyway, an interesting little bit of shop talk for you folks out there, in case you don't actually concern yourself with writing in meter. These are the kinds of things that we think about. So let's go to round two. And stay close to the screen, Lee, please.
All right, and I hope I can get through without coughing. I had a different order in mind, but since you brought out the duck early, and because this does have to do with understanding the difference between the sin and the sinner, and sometimes what's wrong looks right, which is to say, I'm going to read my General von Steuben poem.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's just go ahead and get this over with. Let's see, long before I knew anything about Westchester, I read Miracle at Philadelphia, and my husband loves to fly fish, so we planned a trip so that he could fly fish on the Susquehanna while I went and did research on Valley Forge, because I was wanting to write. In graduate school, I was in love with Norman Dubie, and he did wonderful historical character poems. He has one about Queen Elizabeth I that is just, you should find Norman Dubie and find his Queen Elizabeth I poem. But he had really made me enthusiastic about historical character poems. When I was at Valley Forge, I bought a little booklet that was called Epic on the Schuylkill, which is a river in the Philadelphia area, the Valley Forge, Philadelphia area, and King of Prussia. And so the thing that I learned in that book that made this irresistible to do was that von Steuben was famous for just the most, he would make a sailor blush. And of course, he was just hilarious because he had come over from Prussia and he had broken English. And so all of these things, I'm a nice church lady, and I have a sense of humor, but I generally behave in public except here. I'm off my leash. And so to be able to just make up all the creative swearing I could think of took the idea of, Phil Stafford says the sidereal view, which is his version of Robert Frost's tennis net, that you need something else to be looking at over here. And, what's my next rhyming word? Oh, what is the most disgusting thing I can think of? And it's irresistible. Drilling the troops. General Steuben remarked disgustedly that bayonets were chiefly used as skewers to broil meat. John B.B. Trussell, Jr., Epic on the Schuylkill. In Himmel, as mit bayonet I catch roast meat again, I take it, cut der goddamn Wienerwurst from him, and feed to Brits for fucking tea. Am funny son of bitch, Hamilton? You act like hell if reached for going to Albany and burned estate of Liebchen's rich papa. Fight, duel, shit. You douche slime of a syphilitic crotch. I lick you both hands tied behind. You fart from mouth, but has more sense. Keep up this stink and get new asshole chewed by Washington. Where was I? Aim bayonet at heart of charging horse, and did not to run, not blink. No bastard will have balls to ride you down.
Thank you.
That's better. That was better.
Yeah, that was better.
Yeah, yeah. That helped, Al. You're right.
So,
I had too much
so there's a lot going on here that is not that's not that's ancillary specifically to the poem, but is part of the context, part of the historical context. That makes it really interesting to me because, for one thing, Hamilton uh, acted as his translator because he had such little English that so that's why Hamilton is around. That's why he's so close. And there are all these great references that I can't place them all historically, but I get it. Now, having been in the Army of the United States at a somewhat later time,
Full Metal Jacket.
I can tell you that the use of strong language is a hallowed tradition in the Army. And of course, von Steuben actually is the guy that gets credit for for turning the militia into what was beginning to pass for an actual army. I mean, he brought organization to the people at Valley Forge, and they were just disorganized in the end. So it really, Prussian discipline had a very important part to play in the Revolutionary War. So there's all of that. Then you've got a guy that doesn't really have a command of English, but has a pretty bewilderingly concrete command of English swearing. it's
I took Spanish. I took Spanish from Cuban teachers who had fled, regimes, and came and settled in St. Petersburg. And that was the first thing we learned in 7th grade, was we learned all the swear words. So when my parents would go down to Key West, we used to spend Christmas vacation at Key West when Holiday Inn was $35 a night. And I would just go and I would have a lovely time. And this was in 8th grade. And I had 2 years, a year and a half of Spanish. And so I'm walking through the Cuban neighborhoods and I'm not upset. I can talk to people. It's broad daylight. And this little boy comes by on a bike and he just started, puta this and everything else that I knew. And I just turned around and told him who his mother was and a whole bunch of other stuff in Spanish. That kid, his bike sprouted wings. So, since the time I was 14 and joined the Church of Poetry, I've just been this way.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'd say I really can't think of another poem remotely like this poem. Right. There aren't many poems that you can say that about. So right there, you've accomplished something very valuable and unique. This is a crazy poem, and it's so much fun. I mean, I don't know the historical context at all. I also didn't know that Steuben was thought to swear a lot. If you could have put that, it could have been up in your epigraph somewhere, but I'm not sure it's more fun to just not even know that. So that this poem seems to come even more out of some completely crazy nowhere. And and there are poems, I'm sure there are many poems that exult in profanity and revel in it and luxuriate in it, but not with a German accent. That's the thing. That's the compound, the chemical compound here that you've created. The thing is also a sonnet, I believe, and it rhymes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's just a completely head spinning, crazy poem. And I think, you get the sense you really weren't motivated. The history is the history, but I think you could care less about the history. I think you were really, like you said, you were intrigued at this idea of a cussing German.
Yeah, you're reveling in the voice.
Reveling in the voice and in being able to pull up this sort of crazy dialect poem. And I wouldn't rule out that the history was in the back of your mind also. Not knowing it myself, I couldn't bring the history to it. Al was able to do that. So
Well, when
that's
you
good.
when you look up von Steuben, aside from saying that he brought Prussian discipline to to the colonial troops, it's also mentioned that he was a voluminous uh, swearer, and that the troops loved him for it. He was famous for it, and he was beloved by the troops. So that's why I mentioned that I put in my time in the Army of the United States, because it comes with the territory.
You
There's
know,
very original use of swearing in the Army that I
I
won't
mean,
get into at the moment, but
I'm
Thank
now
you.
thinking that instead of this epigraph, the poem might be better served by an epigraph that says that Steuben was a cusser and was beloved for it. That would really put it,
Okay.
I don't know, it would give it a little more grounding in a context than that. I mean, this is amusing that he remarked disgustingly, and it does lead into the bayonet that
Hmm.
starts the poem. But I'm not sure there wouldn't be, it would add some considerableness to the poem or ground it somehow if you just something to think about. Or you could just be true to your just true to this. Forget it. Leave it out. Just let the
Oh,
reader
that
get buffeted by all this cursing
no,
and not to worry about it.
something
well,
I do need to bring up, however, is that von Steuben is from my out of print master's thesis. This was my migration solo was my master's thesis, and no, this is the notes to Sanguine. No, well, when I do a collected, I'll think about changing it.
the other thing that you
I'm going
learn
to have my collected reprinted.
when you do a little bit of snooping around into the history of it, one of the other things that you learn is that von Steuben was scandalized by the fact that the colonial troops only used their bayonets to skewer broiled meat. They just held them over fires, and he was just so. The whole poem is it's not just an evocation of this unbelievable voice, but the message is spot on. I mean, he taught them how to use their bayonets properly when they had no idea of how to do that, and were using them in this totally degenerate way,
Hmm.
according by his lights.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all right in line, and like I say, having Hamilton in there, Hamilton was legitimately one of the two people assigned to translate. You know, obviously he didn't need help translating this kind of message, but maybe he needed help explaining to people how to march and form squares and pitch tents and things like that. He had an administrator's eye for organizing at the higher levels that made all the difference, from what I read, in terms of the eventual success of that army. So, yeah, it's unique is an overused word, but I think it qualifies in this case. Great.
All right.
There were no ducks in it. I'm not sure why you went immediately to this, but it's any time is a good time to go to this one. So this was fine.
No, but
Dan,
that was your point though about what is wrong and what is right. And when I discuss with my husband, who also was in Uncle Sugar's army, and he was a drill sergeant, and he
oh,
says, yeah,
he seemed like
you know,
such a calm guy when I met him. Not like any of the drill sergeants I had, but that was another time.
okay, well, it's inappropriate for us to discuss that. So I'm going to go right ahead here and say that what I appreciated about the end of the duck thing, though, was is is it right for us to think that hearing swear words is going to make better people? What what exactly is the point of of this hardening, because after my husband got through with being a drill sergeant, he would bring it home. And you know how that went with Miss Sweetie here. Yeah, that was when the real swearing got out.
Okay, then.
And I just told him, I told him, you know, we're starting a family. You are not bringing this crap home. And so he got out of the reserves.
Oh,
So
that's good.
that was the moral question for me. But, you know, do young men who are 17, 18 years old, fresh out of high school in this America, no wonder they have PTSD, you know, in spades. There are some serious questions underneath this, even though it was written as a lark.
Yeah. It's a whole, the use of language in the Army as a whole is a fascinating discussion on which I could shed some small light. But but we're not doing that here tonight. So we'll go to Dan instead and let him spread some oil on the waters. Perhaps. I don't know. Maybe you're going to drive us even crazier, Dan. What have you got?
Okay, it's a G-rated poem called Townie.
Okay, I know this one.
So I'll let you, if you don't have it in front of you, I'll let you grab it. You didn't know what order I'm going to do them in. But anyway, this is the one called Townie. And I think people know what a town, in a college town context, a townie is a person that's not connected with the college. They're a real resident of the town. Townie. It was a stretch to think of her as one, her father being a prof at the college there, where I was plugging away at my bachelor's. What she was doing in high school was probably more like gliding. I only knew her through our playing together in a casual quartet, she on viola, me on cello. How her slender fingers freed that voice of sorrow, pent within her instrument of choice. A few years on, I visited her at an ivy, where it was now her turn to plug away, assuming, a precarious assumption, that she hadn't continued to glide. A perfunctory hug, and it was off to her dorm room for a talk. There were only two places to sit, a chair and a bed. She offered me the chair and sat, no, didn't sit on the bed, but lay on it. Lay on her side, not her back, which might have made the laying more alluring, what with the added oomph it gave the curve of her hip. To have traced that curve with my hand. And yet her air of impersonality kept me in my chair. A bit of our talk that's never seemed unripe for recollecting was her telling me how she'd settled on a major in philosophy. The choice was clinched, she said, when it occurred to her that a number series beginning with 2, 4, 6, 8 couldn't be assumed to continue with 10. That it could be marching to a logic other than the obvious, to any, in fact, of an infinity of logics. This insight drew two words from me, an audible, interesting, succeeded by a silent, duh. Yet interesting didn't begin to suggest the depths this insight held for her. Apparently one of us was an idiot. It didn't matter which of us it was. What mattered was that I was dealing with a being inhabiting a planet far from mine. When eventually I rose from my chair, it was only to signal that I'd best be moving on. I recently found a video of her, professing no less, at yet another ivy, on a topic in Plato. Could that have been a pang I felt in watching it? I do remember checking a slender finger for a ring.
One of the charms of this poem for me is that a much more commonly encountered reveal is being presented with a really interesting and attractive woman who then you have a conversation with and discover that you have nothing to talk about because she's not really very thoughtful and not very smart and not interested in anything. And so the tension is created between what the appearance seems to promise and then what the character reveals. What's nice about this is the inversion of that experience, because I think we've all had that experience where we see somebody that looks interesting, and then when we get to talk to them, they turn out not to be so interesting. But this is an instance where the speaker ends up feeling not very interesting. And it's great. You don't see it coming.
Okay.
And I don't think. And yet again, characteristic of you, there are all these great touches along the way. So for example, apparently one of us was an idiot. It didn't matter which of us it was. So you allow for the possibility that maybe she's the one that's out there, too far out there. But you don't insist on it, and neither do you insist on your own inadequacy, because you can't follow her into these Empyrean realms of thought where there are an infinity of solutions to that, that sequence problem. So there's that. Then there's this really nice connecting that you do with the image of the slender finger, which of course is at the very beginning of the poem and is reintroduced at the very end, which is either conscious or unconscious, but it's deliberate in either case. And so that's really nice. And then, and again, this is maybe characteristic of you. Maybe you're the person who could write this line. No one else I know could have written this line. A bit of our talk that's never seemed unripe for recollecting. That's a wonderful way of putting it. Mm-hmm. It's just I love that line. I mean, obviously it's perfectly metrical, but just the again, we aren't told what we expect to be told in a way that we expect to be told it. We've got a great way of saying it that has to settle in for just an instant, and then we appreciate the meaning of it, but also the manner of it. So those are examples. And then you we're in your mind in this poem, and so this one imaginary digression, to have traced that curve with my hand, ... and yet the door closes very quickly on this imaginary voyage because her air of impersonality kept me in my chair. So it's just elegant. It's elegant language. And to use some of the language that Lee used a few moments ago, this is a delicate exchange. It's a delicate situation. It's not, it's finely wrought because it's an unusual dynamic of interpersonal engagement, and so you have to talk about, I don't think it would do to talk about it in kind of an offhand manner, and you found a way of talking about it that really fits. So those are some of the things that I'm struck by it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. I think still that this is one of the important places where we get inhabiting a planet far from mine, that the the poems and this reading, you all are the most non-misogynist
I
reading
couldn't
to
hear those
me,
words, Lee.
these
Yeah,
poems that were chosen.
yeah. Get
Okay, you
close
are
and
the most and project. You are the most non-misogynist man I know, but this group of poems to me very clearly shows men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And this isn't a bad thing. It's a very good thing, actually. Um, but the I've been the girl explaining the flaky crap. I taught at DePauw, and I had a freshman in poetry as literature. And when I got my evaluations at the end of term, one of the remarks that I treasured most dearly was, "Gosh, this woman is a flake, but he signed up to be an English major in his freshman year because I talked about poetry the way poets do. And at DePauw, where a former vice president attended, um, most of these kids had really good manners, but they had not been taught to think for themselves. So what they had taken as flaky was me showing them how an actual poet's mind thinks about poetry, not, this definition, that definition. It's what you're doing, Dan, where you are doing descriptive criticism rather than prescriptive criticism, which is what I appreciate most about the New England poets I'm hanging with. And that was not a courtesy that was taught when I was in the MFA program at IU.
Well, your voice chopped up a little bit, but I think I got enough of it to understand and to appreciate what you're saying, and I feel happy with both of your responses. I don't really have too much to add. I guess the only thing I would say is that I think I'm not sure this poem really comes into focus for me. I wonder about it, but maybe it lets different dynamics kind of, bump around with each other and doesn't settle in one particular place, which maybe is a virtue of it. I don't know. But one little thing which I could have made more of, and I think doesn't really come through, so I'll just say it here anyway, is that I've always found philosophers, there's something about them that's weird to me. It's like a love-hate thing because I'm fascinated by philosophy. I read any article about an interesting philosopher. I love to read of them, about them, read their work. But there's this thing where they find profundity in some little thing that like the commonsensical view would say, "What are you going on about? What are you worried about?" So this is one of these examples. Is this profound that 2, 4, 6, 8 doesn't have to continue with 10? I didn't think so. It seems kind of obvious to the character
It's
in this poem
open-minded.
but
it's an open-mindedness.
Yeah, open-mindedness and yeah, they're on a wavelength that I'm not on, and I'm sort of two minds about that wavelength. I both admire it and envy it, and at the same time, I have a little mild, it's like contempt for it. Like I could dismiss it a little bit. Like, what's wrong with it?
Well, at least you'll say so kindly.
Well, maybe that comes through. Apparently one of us was an idiot. I don't know which one, but I mean, that's not the heart of the poem, but actually was the reason why this bit of talk never does seem unripe for recollecting, because it opens up this window into the way different people think about X.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, all I would have to say about it. But I'm glad that you seem to both find it interesting or absorbing or something like that. So that's great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, just one thing I would add, because you say that the poem kind of doesn't settle in just in one place, is that there's, although it's very different in a lot of ways, there's a kind of a distant relationship that I feel to the speaker in Prufrock, that
Yes.
that it's that it doesn't settle. It's out. It's unresolved. It's out there. It's going in different directions, but it's not angry. It's puzzled. It notices things, but doesn't. It's not the same voice, obviously, and it's not the same character, but it's very rare that I encounter a poem that expresses this state of mind so clearly.
Hmm.
What
state of mind do you mean?
The state of mind of being exposed and understanding that people think differently, and that there's a whole different world that this young woman operates in, although in other ways it looks like she's in the room with you. And that at the same time, just as you say, one of us was an idiot, but I couldn't tell which one. It's an encounter with a kind of, Lee put it well when she said, Mars and Venus, but it's a very special case of Mars and Venus. We usually think of Mars and Venus in emotional terms. This is in thought processing. I mean, I can understand. It's kind of fascinating to me that there could be an infinity of solutions to the next number in that sequence, because I came up with a science mind, and I do love math, but that's a hallway in the mansion that I chose not to walk down because I thought I'd probably get lost somewhere down there. But I can see that it's a long hallway and there's a lot going on. But the people that are down at the other end of the hall, I don't belong really in a room with them. Yeah. And so this is the dynamic that's going on. Once you realize that you're not like this woman, and that in a way, there is no basis for contact. And yet it's in a setting where we're primed to expect contact. And even the speaker is expecting, without putting a name to it exactly, that, well, what's the signal? Why is I sit in the chair, she gets on the bed, but why is she lying like that what is going on here? This is what a man is thinking in a moment like that. I gotta figure this out. Why is she doing this? Does it mean something I'm supposed to get? Am I supposed to read her mind on this? Should I do something? Should I not do something? I'm embroidering things that you didn't say in the poem, Dan, only because I've been in similar rooms and that's what was going through my mind.
Well, let me, we got a lot of poetry still to get through, but I will just say two quick things. Lee's thing about the Mars-Venus, I don't know if this is sexist of me or not, but the physics, the math mind and so on is stereotypically associated with the man.
Right.
So she is really representing, like, in that, the male side, and I'm more the female side that says, what
confusing as hell.
Yeah. So there's that. And then I'll also say that even though we're from different planets and there's no relationship that's possible here, but on the other hand, I must still be a little intrigued that she's from this mysterious planet, because I do check her finger for a ring at the end of that
sure
thing. So everything is up
Hey,
for
I was
grab,
the
up for
dumbass, not
grabs
her.
here. At least that's the way I feel about it. Everything is up for grabs here.
Yeah, it's all of it rings true,
No.
is what I'm saying. All of it rings
Yep.
true.
Okay.
We've all been
Every
there.
single bit.
Well, thank you
Right.
for that digging deeply into that. I'm glad that it triggered these thoughts on you guys' parts. That's great.
Well, some of the memories
But
it triggered
the
are
proof
not my favorite ones, but
Sorry about that.
the proof
it's all
rock
right.
the proof rock quote though, the proof rock thing is, do I dare disturb the universe?
Yeah, do I dare to eat a
Mhm.
peach? Do I dare disturb the
Mhm.
universe?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. I must go in a different direction. It can't be
Okay.
helped. But,
Okay.
now I'm going to go into one of the excursions that I make from time to time into classical mythology.
Oh, my favorite.
Yep.
And I generally do the same thing. I've got a half a dozen or more, 8 or 10 poems that go into classical. I have some biblical ones too that go into the biblical settings. And what I always do is try hard not to change anything about the story that I've been told, but to investigate and find new territory within the story that I've been told that we haven't been told. And so that's what's going on here. This is called A Pig's Eye, and you'll see almost immediately that this is one of Odysseus's crew members on Circe's island, where the men are famously changed into swine and back. What price misogyny? I mean, we are swinish from time to time. A Pig's Eye.
I have a remark on that later. Okay.
Yeah, okay. She understood me better than she knew. Once the emptied bowls slipped from our grasp and dully clanged against the polished stone beneath our feet, her hospitality revealed its true intent. As bristles sprouted out on our bodies every inch, we fell grunting in a bunch on hands and knees and snuffled at the fragrant table legs. She led us out a back way to the sties, our bellies dragging in the luscious mud, with men's minds still trapped in a herd of swine. My shipmates squealed in protest at their fate. I, though, was thinking it a stroke of luck. Our voyage had been one calamity after another, blown across the sea, skulls cracked between the one-eyed giant's jaws, or beaten flat by rocks heaved from above. We felt like playthings in a children's game. It turned out our captain was a hero. You want to stay away from gods and heroes. The captain was tipped off about the spell. This god or that was always helping him, it seemed. So he could make the sorceress explain the only way he could get home. That was his motivation, getting home. Of course, he had a kingdom and a queen waiting for him. He was in a hurry. I don't blame him. If I had a home and someone to go back to, I'd be too. But there was nothing for me where I'd started. I'd signed on to the mission on a lark to get away. Who knew that it was doomed? So when she changed us back, I thought about the life that we'd be starting up again. I couldn't help comparing it to what I had. Slop buckets kept full to the brim, free foraging the island roots and acorns, the cool, wet mud where I could sink my toes, a life without demands or incident. And silently, alone, I cursed the outcome. Oh, to be men again, my shipmates snorted, cheered by the chance to sleep next to their oars below decks, quarters cramped on every side, to bristle at an order, but obey. I hung back once the changing had begun and watched them wash themselves, their bodies smooth, and put on clothes to hide their nakedness. They'd all agree again to get along and die trying. When the spell began to wear off in me, I could feel the urge to stand up on 2 feet. I sniffled then. A tear rolled from my eye, dropped from my snout.
I love that poem. I love this poem.
Go for it, Lee.
It says, I love it. Hell yes, I'd rather be a pig. So much for the popular music. But when they do turn back into men, they're doing pig things. They're still pigs.
Yes.
It's wonderful. Just these 2 verbs. And it's like, oh my goodness, that is so, the restraint, the brilliance of just those 2 words. And I will tell Dan what, after that poem is from Al's book Into the Dance, and that I think this is one of my very favorite poems out of it. But what I wrote to Al after I read the book was, the most wonderful thing about snout is that it has snot in it. and that tear, drop, not one, no tear coming out of that snout. It's Kleenex for the pig. He snorted.
I snorted. It was necessary.
He snorted.
Well,
I'm having too much fun here.
I mean, here again, I admire the richness and generosity of the way these tales are related. You could see this poem could have been 12 lines long. Could have been, but it's not. And I'm really glad that it's not. There's so much richness of fleshing out the story, the character, the physical situation, and so on. I just think that really makes it so rich. It's not this person is in a rush to get home. This poem is not in a rush to get home. This poem revels. This poem revels in the story that it's telling and enjoys all the sensuous and physical, characterological details. Just taking its time and stretching out in rich and enriching ways. I'm trying to think. I think I checked off. Well, just a little example. That 3rd stanza from the end. I cheered these shipmates, now that they're turned back into men, or how nice it would be to be turned back into men, cheered by the chance to sleep next to their oars. Where did that come from? That's so cool. Maybe you've been on a trireme in another life or in this life, or you read about it, or it's just your pure imagination. Just that little detail, to sleep next to their oars. And in a million years, I never would have thought of that as a way to evoke the life these men want to go back to, and yet at the same time to communicate the poverty of that life. How wonderful it would be to sleep next to your oars below decks and these cramped. Yeah, I just think it's very, very well done. A little thing that went by, I can't really. There's nothing to say about it except that the word bristle does come back at the end of the 3rd stanza. Bristle at an order. And I think we had bristles way, way back in the 2nd stanza of the poem. Now, I don't know if that was intentional. You guys said, "Is my slender figure with a ring." That was intentional. I don't know if this bristle coming back is intentional or not, but it's such a striking word that it kind of leaps out as a resonance.
Well, it was intentional because it's a pig related. Pig bristles.
Right.
So I was determined to find a couple of ways to use it.
No, I mean, the obvious thing, the big thing about this poem is the original take on this situation, that you've got someone here who doesn't want to go back to being a man.
Right.
And that's what, in the movies, that's what we call a high concept. But in this case, that's a good high concept. I mean, that, you could, if you were paraphrasing this poem, you can paraphrase this one in 8 words. It's about a guy who got turned into a pig by Circe, and I guess it's Circe, and
Yeah.
doesn't want to go back to being a man. He kind of likes it being a pig. That's the elevator pitch for this poem. There are a lot of
Yes,
poems you can't have an elevator pitch about a lot of poems. This one
that's
you
true.
can, and it's a good elevator pitch. It's an original take. It goes kind of deep. So bravo, I'm with Lee. I quite like this poem, quite admire it.
Well, it's a poem based on a concept, and so it can be related as just the concept can be related. But you're right, lots of poems aren't based on concepts. Um, so you forgive me stealing Mud Luscious from E. Cummings and
Yeah,
inverting the
Hell,
words.
yes.
I didn't
Yes.
even notice. I not only do I forgive it, I didn't even notice it, and I know that poem very well, but it didn't even notice it. You
Good.
know why?
Yeah.
Because it works so well this way too, just as a Tennysonian mouthful of
Tennysonian. We
luscious,
will get back
luscious,
to him.
Yeah.
succulent sounds. It's like you
Well,
and Elliot, you and E. Cummings kind of, to me, kind of hit on it independently, even if that's not true.
well, I was aware, of course, I was aware of Cummings, but I could not use it just because he had used a variant. But I can say that this was a fun poem to write, and part of what made it fun was the journey of the imagination into the mind of this guy in the body of a pig. And so some
It's
of
a
the
science
details,
fiction thing.
well, it is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in that sense, it's a transformational Jekyll Hyde, it's got all of that. But when he's a pig, I like, he likes being a pig. And so I like finding the details that tip you off to the change. So if I can point out a line in my own poem that I liked, it was at the very beginning, snuffled at the fragrant table legs.
Yeah, that struck out. That stuck out. Yeah, excellent, excellent.
It's like, well, no human would want to get on his hands and knees and smell a table leg.
Yep, excellent. Glad you called that one out. That's excellent.
So yeah, then later when he is talking about the glories of the sty and of a swine's life, he's sincere.
I never doubted it.
All right, well, great. Let's move on.